Hi there and a warm welcome to the highlights of round 4 from the 42nd Chess Olympiad. My name is Ilja Zaragatski and I'm going to take you through the major happenings of today in Baku. Let's not lose any time, let us dive right into the action and let's check the pairings for a start. And as you might be able to see at the very first glance, over there on the first table, Ukraine versus Russia, absolute top clash of the round with the happier ending for the Ukrainians. The top favorites from Russia have been beaten by the smallest of possible margins, 2.5, 1.5. Remarkably so due to the fact that the Ukraine hasn't been even playing with their strongest possible lineup. Vasily Ivanchuk, rumor has it, is preferring to take part in a checkers tournament instead of playing the Olympiad in Baku. And what is also quite remarkable is that this match has been decided by 3, or rather 2, however you want to have it, black wins. 3 black wins in this clash altogether, but 2 black wins for the Ukraine, thereby beating Russia 2.5, 1.5. That is quite an interesting result, underlining the problems that Russia has been having in the past playing Olympiads, their 7th participation where they might not be able to collect the title, even though traditionally they, of course, are the top seed and first contender to the title. We'll zoom in on detail in this match with the concrete happenings on the boards later on. Let us check the other pairings as well first. So, India, without their national hero Vishy Anand, were able to beat Cuba, who pulled off a win against Poland in the previous round. However, here they were defeated by the Indians with one decisive result on board 3, where Santosh Vidit, the young Indian Grandmaster, beat Quesada Perez with the white pieces. Third table, another top contender to the title with 3 absolute top players on the first 3 boards. The United States of America weren't able to beat the Czech Republic, so the match ended 2-2 with the Czech, admittedly not a bad team, either with David Navara and Viktor Laznička, 2 top players on the very highest of levels in their midst. So the Czech Republic were able to defend successfully. The Americans not able to breach the defenses, so 4 draws, not even 1 decisive result. Bit of a disappointment, but still there are 7 rounds to go, so everything can be possible. Romania versus Azerbaijan was a clear deal. On the other hand, the Azeris are showing really great shape in this tournament. Apparently not suffering under the pressure that is certainly there since they are the home team and the whole nation interested in this event. To the contrary, quite motivated, quite inspired, so it seems, by the very fact that it's such a big event, such a big happening in the home country of Azerbaijan. Beating Romania 3-1, Romania has been able to beat the Norwegians the round before, of course, with their world champion on the first board, Magnus Carlsen. However, today, Konstantin Lupulescu had to concede a loss against Shak Mamedyarov, thereby rendering Shak Mamedyarov one of the top players of the tournament with 4 out of 4 so far, all games won on the first board. What more can you ask for? Same applies to Arkady Neidich, former German national player who also won his game on the 4th board and also has scored 4 out of 4 so far. Nothing to argue with this performance. Very convincing match by the Azeris once again, who are really going for it. And I believe anyone who wants to win the title will have to beat those guys. Another team which is, of course, up there is the Chinese team. The Chinese men are certainly the title holders, won the Chess Olympiad 2014 in Tromsø, and now beat Italy quite convincingly 3-1. They were, of course, big favorites, and they adhered to that role. A result which sounds really clear, however, the level of the players was quite comparable, quite close to each other. Between England and the Netherlands, a very clear victory for the Dutch national squad with their top guy, Anish Giri, who has been able to hold Mickey Adams with the black pieces to a draw, thereby ending his winning streak of 3 games in a row, but still securing the win for the Netherlands, since all 3 other boards were decided in favor of the Dutch. Of course, there have been another couple of very interesting clashes on the top boards, but also on the lower boards, which of course we are not gonna have the time of going through. So I'm gonna pick out some cherries. France 2-2 against Greece, similarly to the US, they haven't been able to win a single game, thus a draw in their match. Spain beat Peru, their small Spanish-speaking brothers, if you want to call it that way, from Peru, 3.5-0, with their top player Julio Granda Zuniga not taking part in this Olympiad, but commentating alongside with Pepe Cuenca in the Spanish stream. So the Peruvians, they lost against Spain. What else was interesting? Certainly the clash between Georgia and Bulgaria. Bulgaria had to concede a draw against Sudan in the first round. The only surprise so far, was it the first round or the second round? I think it was the first round. So many matches to remember, quite impossible to do, at least for me. Anyway, Bulgaria had to concede another loss against Georgia, and even their top guy, their previous world champion Veselin Topalov, lost his game against Badur Jubava. Badur with a very nice performance. Quite patient play and outplaying the former world champion. There have been also a couple of clear results. For example, the Canadians beat Indonesia and Hungary beat Nicaragua 4-0. And then we had the clash between Australia and Norway, as you can see here. And again, the world champion Magnus Carlsen wasn't able to get a full point with the black pieces. He was held to a draw by David Smurden. Even more so, David Smurden did have the chance to play on. We'll take a look at this game later on as well. I believe it is time to go to the women's section before we dive deeper by checking out the games in detail. So what happened in the women's section? The Russian ladies were successful against Hungary. Hungary, of course, could have played theoretically with the Polgar sisters, but as ever so often the Polgar sisters prefer not to take part in the Chess Olympiad. They don't play any women's tournaments traditionally, basically. Still, Hungary, quite a strong women's team, weren't able to hold their own against the Russians, even though it was a very close encounter and it could have ended 2-2 easily, but still the favorites got their will in the end. Ukraine against France, on the other hand, was quite a clear thing. 3.5-0, no chance for the French women. India, Israel 2-2, and the Azeri women had to be happy with a draw against Romania 2-2 as well. Something which is very curious and very interesting was the match of the Chinese women, who of course are the top contenders for the medals and also for winning the Olympiad. They were able to beat Latvia 2.5, 1.5, but their reigning world champion and number one of the world, of the women's chess world, Hu Yifan, had to resign against her Latvian opponent. Let me spell that out more or less correctly. Probably it's going to be horrible. Dana Reznice Ozola. And we're going to take a closer look at that game later as well. Quite a nice success for the Latvian women's grandmaster. But Hu Yifan wouldn't be Hu Yifan if she wasn't still smiling after the game. We had seen some pictures of her from the live feed, which I believe is a very nice feature of this Olympiad. Very interesting insights into the playing hall and onto the players' faces as well. So Hu Yifan was still able to smile. She's just a happy camper all over the place, whatever happens on the chessboard, and yet she's a very, very strong and also passionate chess player. So I believe that were the highlights on the top boards regarding the results. There are, of course, some favorites already separating themselves from the rest of the field, but still stuff is not as simple and things can go either way in the remaining 9 rounds. Now I would like to go into detail on, here we go, on some of the games that were strikingly interesting in this 4th round. And let us start with the girls, with the women section. The game between Dana Reznice Ozola and Hu Yifan, the reigning world champion, where there has been, as mentioned before, a major surprise. So this is the position after 32 moves, and here the white player decided to go for an attack. There's opposite colored bishops on the board, however, it's far away from an endgame, and thus the side with the better attacking chances usually prevails in such circumstances, and that's exactly what we saw in this game. So h5, levering this pawn on g6, which is certainly a weakness. Not so easy to defend this guy. Also, the h-file might become an issue later on once it opens. And even h6 from time to time is a really unpleasant move to deal with. So Hu Yifan decided to take this pawn. But after knight h4, queen c7, queen f3, it was clear that this pawn is not going to survive any longer than a snowball in hell. And even worse, once this pawn falls, the rest of the king side will be quite vulnerable as well. So what to do? It's already quite difficult to deal with all the threats that white has got. King g8, prophylactic move going out of this vis-a-vis with the queen, the potential one at least. But g6 is a really hard strike against black's camp. What to do? Knight h6, h takes g6 doesn't really help black's cause. Knight takes g6, attacking the exchange on e7, and after rook to d7, which would be the most logical move, bishop takes f5, is really powerful, and nothing more to do than to resign at this point in time already. Hence g6, knight h6 followed, but still the white attack is kind of really irresistible. All his forces are joining and ganging up against black's king. There's all kinds of threats against this pawn chain, e6 and f5. There's the pin along the e-file certainly, and there's just no way from preventing white's pieces from entering. Queen takes f4, the move played by Hu Yifan, takes on h7 and takes on f5. We mentioned this motive just a minute ago, and now there's the choice between dying quicker or slower. Either way, white is going to get through here. So e takes f5, king takes g8, doesn't concede the exchange just yet, but is equally difficult to defend. For example, bishop takes e6 check, king h7, I meant to say, for example, queen g6, king h8. And now one of the ways to finish this game would be queen takes e8 and knight g6 with a nice little fork, thereby winning the whole house, in this case the rook, and also the game. So he takes f5 is what followed, but advice was already hard to give for black. Takes on e7, just a check here, knight g2. You know the knight is the best friend of the king. Together they complement each other in defending the white monarch really nicely in this position and in many other positions as well. Exchange on e7, and now we can see it's not only an exchange, it's all kinds of other advantages as well. The bishop is pinned, the rook is very active, b6 is certainly weak, and white is just going to finish it off really soon. Last hope, maybe white will blunder f3, but no such thing. Queen e5, pinning the pawn to the queen, and there's all sorts of pins, of course, along the 7th rank, for example, to the bishop. So nothing much to do. Pawn is also hanging. It can't be defended. Queen g4, last try. Queen takes f4, just a check on d1 and knight e1. Even defending this guy on d3, even though it would not have been necessary. Queen h5, knight f3. Just a couple of precise moves by white, even though many continuations had been winning, and now Hu Yifan finally resigned. There's no way she can hold together her position. For example, queen f7 or king f7 or h7 is gonna be met by a fork on g5. The king has to defend, the bishop on f8 can't go to h8. Knight g7 finally simply exchanges queens, and this is certainly very hopeless. Not only is black one exchange down, but also this pawn is a really quick runner, the Usain Bolt of the A file, if you will. So Hu Yifan had to concede a draw, but it was nice to see that she was still not super upset. She was still smiling, and hopefully she will be able to recover from this loss and continue her dominance in the women's chess world, the one that we are used to, this dominance. Another game which I found quite nice in the women's section was played in the match between the Ukraine and, here we go, and France, and it was the encounter between Anna Muzychuk and Sylvia Collas. What looks like a Sveshnikov very soon ends in a horrible position for black. Looks like a typical position, but here black had to play. There was no way around it. He had to play, or she in this case much rather, had to play f takes e4 and cling to these tactical means to be able to hold her position. This is a line which looks very good for black, but instead maybe knight cb6 was a move that black didn't like here. Instead, knight c6, of course, looks like the normal reaction to being attacked by a pawn, just retreating the knight. However, after e takes f5, you want to recapture this pawn, of course. You don't want to take on on d5, because this would be just a catastrophe of strategical sorts. So bishop takes f5, and now there is one resource which the black player, I suppose, simply missed. Queen f3, something that might be not too typical of the Sveshnikov, but it's there, and this bishop is being attacked. The problem is it can't be defended, certainly. Knight takes e7 not only loses to knight takes e7, but even the beautiful knight f6 mate, smothered mate in a way. What else is possible? Queen d7, there's gonna be a fork on f6, which, as you might have anticipated already, is the main problem. This knight jump to f6, main problem, black's position. Queen c8 is not helping either. Knight cb6, and even now queen e6. There's another fork. All those jumpy knights, they like to fork, so watch out for them. in your games. Bishop g6 instead, knight cb6. There's the knights again. Two octopuses controlling the whole board. And the idea is not going for an exchange hunt, but actually it's gonna be a rook, since the second knight will be able to fork king and queen once the queen captures on a8. So what to do? Nothing better than playing rook b8, and now we can see the idea of knight c2 b6, check on f6, king e7, and knight b2 d5, check again, king to e6. Admittedly, the king is taking part in the fight for this important square on d5. However, it's not such a good idea in this case, or in any case really, since the king is going to be extremely vulnerable here in the center. No big surprises here. So bishop c4 followed. g3 was also a winning move. Well, basically there's so many winning moves. Everything is winning here. Certainly black cannot survive with a king here, but at least it's a fun position. So thank you for that, Miss Colas. Bishop c4 followed. All kinds of discovered attacks looming now. So what to do? b5, let's attack this guy. Queen h3, that was the other threat. Problem is bishop f5, only legal move in the position, is being met by knight e3. So discovered check, b takes c4 would be the way to go. If not, queen takes f5, king e7, knight ed5 would be another picturesque mating motive. This king can't be envied, so it's taking on f6, but that doesn't help either. Queen takes f5, king g7, and now queen takes f7. There was even a quicker mate, queen g4, and now either king h6, knight f5, or king f6, knight d5. This is certainly a lot of fun playing this position if you're on the winning end. So many nice mating motives. See how the white pieces are dominating all the important squares and files and diagonals in this position. But even queen f7 was enough for a quick mating win. King h6 and now simple h4, and there's no cure against knight f5 and knight g4 with a mating threat. Actually, knight g4 was possible immediately. King g5, h4, king g4, bishop e2. Reminiscent of the romantic era of chess, where king marches through the whole board were on the daily agenda. So I would have liked that continuation. But of course, there's a lot of alternatives on every move how to mate. For example, queen f3 is a mate to f3. I mean, it's just fun to play this position, at least for white. So congratulations to Anna Muzychuk and the Ukrainian ladies who beat France quite convincingly. All right, those were my highlights from the women's section. So now let's go back to the open section and let's start off with the top clash of the day between Russia and the Ukraine. The Ukraine on the first board, as mentioned before, without Vasily Ivanchuk, but with Pavel Elyanov, also incredibly strong player, 2760 at his peak. And Pavel was able to exert some pressure onto Vladimir Kramnik in this game. But in the end, when the score was 2-1 in favor of the Ukrainians, he simply offered a draw, and there's not much black can do against it. The mere space advantage and the possible plans of white on the king side, they suffice to grant white a small but clear, actually that's a contradiction I believe, small but lasting advantage I would say. So nice game by Pavel Elyanov, keeping everything under control throughout the whole game. Would have ended in a draw either way. most probably, but some winning chances created. What more can you ask for against Vladimir Kramnik, the number 2 of the world, I believe, since Maxime Vachier-Lagrave has been playing some draws in this Olympiad. One very important decision took place on the second board, where Ruslan Ponomariov, former world champion, was able to beat Yevgeny Tomashevsky from, however, a position which favored white in many cases. So Yevgeny Tomashevsky, he did have a nice advantage in the middle game in major phases of this game. And here, however, he chose the wrong continuation. He played rook h3. Not sure what his idea was. Maybe he wanted to triple on the h-file and then increase the pressure against black's kingside. There was one downside though, and the downside was that this pawn on h4 was not being protected anymore. One move which I really like, and even the engine agrees, is knight g3 with this typical idea of simply sacrificing the pawn on g4 and then pushing the other pawn up the board. h4 to h5, you might find this idea quite familiar from dragon positions. All right, let's sacrifice the pawn, whatever. Look at these pieces. White is very active, threatening to enter black's position via the h-file. This bishop on e7 is really a problem child. He doesn't contribute by any means to fighting for the light squares around the black king. And white has all of his forces in play, and this is a really unpleasant attack that black is facing. There's some ideas with knight b5. There's a weakness on c7. Even knight a7, once the rook moves and then jumps to c6, are conceivable. I really wouldn't want to be black in this position. I believe the attack is really simply decisive almost. However, Yevgeny Tomashevsky decided to play rook h3, and from here on it went all downhill for him. H takes, f takes, g4, and rook takes h4. What might he have missed? Maybe he thought that g5 was the only defense in this position, since once the bishop moves, there's all kinds of nasty checks along the h-file. And it is true that g5 is quite bad for black after knight e3. The knight is coming to f5. What a nice outpost, threatening the king and the bishop. And white is doing fine, even more than fine. However, bishop g5 was probably a resource that Yevgeny Tomashevsky missed here. The bishop is defending the crucial h6 pawn. Note that bishop f6, well, probably also even possible, but at least bishop e7 should not be played because of this check on h6 first and then on h8 later. So bishop g5, queen h7, king f8, and now it turned out that it was just one check. Queen h8, king e7. Black is saying, so whatever, I just won a pawn, I've got everything under control. Show me what you got, and white got nothing. Knight h2, trying to improve the knight at least. Queen f6. Now knight f3 is not a good move. As you can see, rook f1, bishop f4, simply blocking this f-file. Important resource, of course. Knight f3. And now some little dances here on the h-file, on the f-file. But there was nothing much that white could do from this point on, and the rest was just nice conversion by Ponomariov, showing the Russian school of converting advantages against the Russians. Finally, Russland, German word for Russia, phonetically very close, but didn't help the whites' cause a single bit, and the rest was quite simple for white, just for black. 2 pawns up, control over the position. Now the rook is going to enter white's camp, and it's just hopeless. So Tomashevsky resigned. On the third board, another black win, this time in favor of the Russian favorites. Jan Nepomniachtchi, another player with perfect score, 4 out of 4 on the third board, and he managed to beat Anton Korobov. And Anton's kryptonite in this game was the weakness of his king. It all looks nice and well with this pawn chain, control over the dark squares, nice outpost on f6. But it's not that simple, it turns out. There's all kinds of threats against the king looming. Of course, white is not lost by any means, or even worse for that matter, but it's just unpleasant to play with such an open king. So what happened? Those minor pieces exchanged, and in this heavy pieces endgame, it turns out this king is feeling quite uncozy. It went to f3 to prevent queen e4 check. Problem was, for example, queen to e3 to control the square, then rook d4 is quite unpleasant, threatening to double along the d file, and whoever gets control over the only open file in this position is the party with the advantage. Thing is, you can't really take on d4 twice because this rook would be hanging, and this pass pawn is also not pleasant to deal with. So what to do? Play king f3, but here h5. Nice little move to give the black king another square, and also play h4 sometimes and create another weakness on g3. Also maybe h4, h3 on occasion is possible. So nice little resource. Remember to include all your resources, all your attacking units in your attack if you can, and that's exactly what Nepomniachtchi does here. And yeah, it's just really unpleasant to play for white. So it's not a big surprise that at some point there are going to be mistakes coming, especially as you get closer to time control, of course. Once time is lacking, then your decisions won't be perfect either. Little intermediate move, h takes g3. White cannot take on f8 because of g takes h2. It's a check, king moves to f2, say, h1 queen. And here, black is just mating. It's a queen against two rooks, but this rook is hanging and there's all kinds of mates in the air. So you can't do that. What can you do? You take back on g3, rook takes d8, rook d2, and rook h8. Still, white's cause is not lost yet, but it's just incredibly disgusting to defend this position. Also, these pawns might become a weakness sometimes. Rook d1, queen h5, king went to e4, but even that didn't save him. Queen to e7, now the queen is threatening to come from the other side. What to do? White is planning to flee to the queen side, but no such thing. Check on d7. Now, king c2 would have been possible, but for some reason, Korobov seems to have disliked this move. Now, king b1 and rook h2 is a really nasty resource, since queen takes d1 is mate. So king e3 instead, but now check on h3, king e4, and queen c6. And black resigned, only one move to play here, but then there's queen a4, nice motive. Drawing arrows, not my forte, it seems. So this is a mate, of course. White can delay the mate by a couple of moves, but we're not in kindergarten here. It's clear that black is going to win. So white resigned. Congratulations to Jan Nepomniachtchi. Nice win over Anton Korobov, but it wasn't enough for the Russian male team, or open team, I should say, to score any team points, any match points. And the reason for that was that Andrei Volokitin was another player of this competition with a perfect score, 4 out of 4 on his fourth board. For the Ukraine, he managed to beat Alexander Grischuk. And Grischuk's main mistake, so it seems to me, in this game was not blundering something or overseeing some resource. Well, obviously that also happened, but his main mistake in this game, let me just show you what I mean, was his time management, his famously adventurous time management, as you can see here. Let me just scroll up our broadcast site a bit. 10th move, e3. Do you really have to spend half an hour on this move? Come on, you're gonna need this thinking time later on in the game. So e3, 27 minutes, then another 35 minutes for 12. Knight takes e4. How big can the nuances and subtleties in this position be to justify this consumption on time? Just 1 hour on these two moves together, and then as a consequence of that, even though here the position is quite fine for white, but subsequently it was just not enough time to find all the right moves. Yeah, so here Alexander Grischuk could have taken the draw, just taken the rook on e8 and then allow his opponent to repeat moves. But he didn't. He just sacrificed the bishop. Interesting picture here. White is just one piece up, but he's not winning because of this perpetual check idea. So bishop takes c6. At least white got a pawn. Now the bishop can retreat to g2 if black wanted to take on g4. Not advisable to take on g4, thus b takes c6, queen e4, c5, and now it turned out black's counterplay is quite sufficient to secure him decent chances. And in the following sequence, Andrei was able to pose severe problems on white and force him to do some difficult decisions, and in the end he simply, or not so simply, but in the end he won this rook end game with two passed pawns against just one potential passed pawn on the queen side, and won the game. Let me note that I have played together with Andrei for many years in the German Bundesliga, and I know that he's a big fan of time scramble as well, but here in this game he proved that his time management was a bit superior, even though, as we can see, let me just go back here, even though Andrei also spent quite some time for a couple of moves, but in the end he had the luckier end on his side. Let's go here. All right, that were the games from the top clash between Russia and the Ukraine, but of course that were not all the highlights that I wanted to show you. Let me just check my cheat sheet. What else is interesting? Well, something that is always interesting is what did the world champion do? We have seen before that Magnus Carlsen was held to a draw against David Smur, the Australian Grandmaster. Let me just scroll down a bit. Well, actually, I can do it more clever. Here it is. Here's the draw between Smur and Magnus Carlsen. Very interesting game. Let me just get to the crucial part. If you want to see it in detail, analyze it deeply, feel free to check our broadcast site on Chess24. It's also available on the official Olympiad site, where you will be able to use the engine, use the database, and see what's what. So this here was the crucial moment, or one of the crucial moments at least, in the game. Messy position, black is a pawn up, black does have the pair of bishops. That doesn't make any difference in this position though. What is very important is the safety of black's king. Black is certainly a bit worried about his monarch. The white pieces are aiming to the queen, to the king side. Certainly White's king is also a little bit airy there, but Black is simply underdeveloped to pose any significant threats. So Rook g3, you might want to double or just sacrifice something on h7 or g7, one of the next moves. So here there was the choice between the two queen moves, queen h4 and queen h5. And Magnus decided to offer the trade of queens. However, this was a bit of a mistake. Queen h5 is what the engines claim would have been the better choice. Just keeping it cool, well, it's easy for them to say, not having any emotions like us humans from flesh and blood. But those silicon monsters, they say queen h5 and no big thing. Just a pawn up, e5 is a threat. There's one of those minor pieces coming to help the king. Might play g6 if I want to. And things are looking fine. However, Magnus chose to play queen h4. And here there was another resource for white. Rook goes to h3 here. And as we can see, both bishop and rook are squinting at that pawn on h7. And not only is that a pawn, but it's a very important one. One of the main covering pawns of Black's kingside position. So what to do? Bishop g5, one of the few resources that are acceptable here for Black. And yeah, bishop takes h7 would have certainly been possible. Now some discovered attack. There's no material to win, but okay, let's try bishop c2 check, then bishop h6, and both players seem to have agreed that, well, this is fine for Black. Black has returned one of his extra pawns, but on the other hand, he has been able to exchange queens. His position is kind of stable. He'll be able to develop soon and maybe seize his pair of bishops. That's not the whole truth to the position, though. White is still better developed. If he wants, he can collect one of the bishops if he's so afraid of the ominous, mighty pair of bishops. But what is also important is that the king is not feeling that safe yet either. So knight f3, knight e5, knight g4 would have been a maneuver to look out for. And there's all kinds of other things. Let me just try to make some moves which don't make any sense really. But yeah, just to show you the potential in White's position. I don't know, let's play something like this. Boom, knight takes f7. Just a little mate. Note that this bishop is controlling this h7 square for the king to flee. So it doesn't work. So, long story short, David Smurden would have been well advised to continue this game if he wanted to win, of course, by taking on h7, simply retreating the bishop and then just playing this position. Even though the queens are off, there's still some stuff to play for, but who can blame him? Rook g1 is kind of a secure draw against the reigning world champion. The thing is, bishop h6 certainly doesn't work since this pawn is pinned, so you can't do that. You can go h6, but here White's idea is to simply take on g5, then give a check on h7, and then retreat the bishop and repeat the moves. So, draw against the world champion. There's worse things under the sun that can happen to you. So, quite happy with this result. The young Australian Grandmaster will be, I reckon. So, yeah, Magnus Carlsen not able to win the second Black game in a row. In the previous round, he drew against Constantin Lupulescu of Romania. But still, tournament is going to go for another 7 rounds. Anything is possible. And just another game that I really wanted to show you from one of the more interesting matches in this 4th round in the open section, at least to me, and I'm sure most of you will agree, was one of the games in the Netherlands England match. And it was this match in this game in particular. Benny Book against Gawain Jones, two very strong grandmasters, both 2600 rated. And here white to move came up with a very elegant solution of how to make use of his advantage. Well, if we look at the position, black already has a hard time as it is. Black does have the pair of bishops, he does have the space advantage, and yeah, white's pieces are simply coordinated much better. There's no harmony in the black's camp, the pieces don't work together well, and yeah, you gotta have a feeling for that, and you gotta feel the crucial moments. So did Benny Book, and took on e7 here. This pawn was up for grabs since rook takes e7, queen takes d6 is well, how do you call it, family attack on half of black's camp. Both rooks and knight on c5 are hanging. What to do? You can't defend it all. Knight c6, at least let's keep both those rooks. Idea is bishop takes c6. Well, I don't actually know what the idea is. Maybe rook takes e3, but even that is not enough to hold the balance. Let's say takes, and now queen takes b8. So not even that would have helped, but even queen takes e5 is very simple. Just collecting the piece, being 2 pawns up, pair of bishops, pressure against the queen side. What else do you can you want in this position? Takes, rook takes e2. All right, you got 1 pawn, but let me just enter the 7th rank here. Oops, yeah, those arrows. Attack f7, increase the pressure against b7 and c6 against this complex. Okay, b6, so counterattack to this bishop, but whatever. Bishop d6, knight e5. Trying to hold it somehow with tactical means, but it's not gonna be enough. Black is not gonna be able to do it. Rook e7, rook d8, and now king f1. And we can see that black's army is overstretched. Black cannot defend all the stuff there is, has to sacrifice in exchange. And now, well, it's just simple and decisive activity of white's pieces, as if it wasn't enough. Now bishop f5, there's no defense against that. Nice win by Benjamin Book, my former teammate at Kartenberg in the Bundesliga, against my current teammate in the Dutch league in Groningen, Gawain Jones. I'm just gonna pretend like anyone cares. All right, I believe that have been the highlights of the 4th round from the 42nd Chess Olympiad in Baku. I believe all of you chess fans out there are enjoying the show that the players in Baku are offering to us. A lot of exciting games, a lot of really top-notch clashes, and I would be very happy to welcome all of you for the next live commentary round tomorrow, 1 p.m. Central European time, 3 p.m. local time in Baku. Check out all the live shows either on the official website or on Chess24. We've got live commentaries in English, Spanish, Russian, Azeri, and in German. So check it out. You will definitely enjoy it. Other than that, enjoy your evening or your morning whenever you might watch this video. And yeah, I'd be happy to see you back tomorrow. Enjoy and see you soon.